It was perhaps the most anticipated ruling of the 8th Parliament, and it took hours in coming. Speaker of Parliament Alban Bagbin, upon taking his seat, zoomed right into his decision.
When voters elect a candidate, they do so based not only on the individual's personal qualities, but also on the political party platform they represent. Party switching or defection, therefore, can be seen as a breach of the mandate and social contract between the Member of Parliament and the electorate. These constitutional safeguards ensure that Members of Parliament remain accountable to both their parties and the electorate.
Alban Bagbin then proceeded to thrash argument that the constitutional provisions in question only applies to the future.
If Article 97(1)(g) and H were to apply only in future parliaments, it will render these provisions effectively superfluous. By the time the next parliament is constituted, any member of parliament who has defected or switched political allegiance during the current parliament will no longer be in violation of the provision.
Alban Bagbin then declared all 4 seats as vacant.
Accordingly, I proceed to inform the House that by the notification of the polls, the following members of Parliament have by their actions vacated their seats in Parliament.
So what exactly will this mean to the composition of Parliament? There was a hint in the Speaker's ruling.
The resultant effect on the composition of this House would be that the NDC would have 136 seats, while the MPP would have 135 seats. That's making the NDC the majority party in Parliament.
But the NPP group are now set to boycott Parliament until the Supreme Court determines the case they have filed.
A conspiracy between the Speaker and the minority to bring confusion in the House. It is clear that Mr. Speaker avoided service of the writ to do the bidding of the NDC. The majority caucus immediately are boycotting Parliament until this matter is determined by the Supreme Court.
However, the NDC group are already basking in their newfound role as the majority group in Parliament.
We have the working majority. Right, Honourable Speaker, beginning the next parliamentary sitting, will begin the process to take over as the majority caucus of this Parliament.
The House is set to reconvene on Tuesday, 22nd October, when the NDC MPs will now take the right-hand side of the Speaker, appoint chairpersons of certain key committees, and perhaps even elect a second deputy speaker from among their colleagues. The NPP MPs will, however, fight this to the end. Kweku Asante for Joy News.
And that was Kweku Asante on the beat there. We're talking about that major issue, that topical matter, and it's a major shift in Ghana's democratic architecture as triggered by the ruling of Speaker Alban Bagbin to declare those 4 seats vacant, leaving the country to navigate these very uncharted territory or waters. Well, joining us for a conversation on these dynamics, we have Dr. Rashid Draman. He is with ASEP. He was sharing his thoughts with us before this ruling, and now I would want to find out how relevant it is and what seismic shifts it is going to bring to bear. We also have Professor Bafo Adjumandua. He's a former UN governance advisor. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
Good morning to you, Ben.
Let's start from the very start. Dr. Draman, how did this ruling meet you? What are your takeaways from the ruling? You said that on the face of things, what applied, the precedent that had been set in 2020 by Professor Aaron Michael Quay, should apply now. The Speaker, Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin, has ruled that those seats are vacant. Of course, the Apex Court will have to rule on the matter as well. But what are your takeaways, briefly, in about 2 minutes?
Well, thank you very much, Benjamin, and good morning to everyone. I didn't expect anything apart from what the Right Honorable Speaker did yesterday. Like I said on your platform 2 days ago, speakers rule based on the Constitution, based on the standing orders, and sometimes based on precedent.
Right.
What happened 4 years ago, we are still dealing with the same Constitution. Those articles haven't changed. And like we heard in the Speaker's ruling, I mean, for those who think this is about the future, you know, by the time we get to the 9th Parliament, I mean, there is no issue to discuss about these MPs who are caught in the web of this violation of this constitutional provision. I mean, it's seismic, as you said, it's almost a very serious earthquake. We've never seen this before. And for me, the 8th Parliament has lived up to the expectation that some of us had right from day one, that is going to be one that is going to spring a lot of surprises on Ghanaians.
Right.
It's going to be one that will be completely different from all the 7 parliaments before it. And I think we haven't seen the end yet. And I think that the right thing to do is what the leader of the MPP in Parliament has said. I mean, let the court decide, and let us all live by what the decision of the court is. And I hope that the court is going to look at this very, very quickly, because otherwise our country is going to be crippled, because already tensions are very high. I mean, leading up to, elections in the next few weeks. If we don't have determination of this matter as quickly as possible, the governance of our country might grind to a halt.
Okay. And you say that if things are not done speedily, the governance of this country might grind to a halt. Government business is now technically in the hands of the majority, which is the former minority or the opposition in Parliament. But let me also hear from Professor Bafo-Agyeman-Duah. Your quick takeaways from yesterday's monumental ruling by the Speaker.
Thank you, Ben, and good morning to my good friend, Dr. Draman, and others. Yes, actually, my comments are not very different from what my good friend has already articulated. But you see, he made a point at the very end of his commentary that if we are not careful, governance will grind to a halt. And that is where my concern was. I know that on the surface of it, the Speaker made the right decision, because for me, that's what the Constitution says. But in addition to the 3 points that Dr. Draman made about the basis for making the Constitution, the precedent, and whatever it is, there's also something that's higher than that. In governance, you are always looking for how you make sure your country does not slide into chaos, especially looking at the circumstance of the issue at this point. So I thought, even though, as I say, from all what I've heard from constitutional lawyers, and I'm not a lawyer, I suspected strongly that this would be the Speaker's decision. Nonetheless, I thought he would deliver a masterstroke in a way that even though he can acknowledge the factual points of the case, he could at the same time certain things into account in order to override that principal point. One, if I look at the issue of representation, for me it's important, because he is going to deny 4 constituencies representation in Parliament for the next few months that we have left. And that maybe we can discuss this later, but that for me was critical. But of course, being a lawyer himself and being a veteran in the Parliament, I thought he decided on what he thought was right. But I wish that he had rather delivered a decision that would have stayed the course without necessarily pulling this to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to begin to meddle in the affairs of Parliament.
Thank you very much. Of course, the issue of precedent also comes in. Let me bring in Inusaf Hussaini, the former Tamale Central legislator. He's also a lawyer, and he speaks to the issues this morning. Mr. Hussaini, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you too?
I'm well. What are your brief takeaways? I mean, you've been in Parliament for a long time. Is this strange, the ruling of the Speaker? And like you heard Professor Akufo-Addo say, the problem there is what this does in terms of government business, in terms of leadership in Parliament, in terms of between now and the end of the 8th Parliament and how things go. How critical is this decision?
So, let me say that this decision is consistent with the rule of law, the cardinal principles of which are certainty and predictability. That a person must be able to predict to some degree of certainty the consequences of his actions or decisions. So if you are a governance person, you must laud these decisions. Now people cannot act, especially those who have voted into Parliament, cannot take the mandate of the people who elected them into Parliament in the first place for granted. And that going forward, anybody, now that the precedent has been repeated, anybody will know that you can't be in Parliament and seek to run on the ticket of another party or as an independent while still in Parliament, because there is automaticity involved here. Immediately you take a decision inconsistent with the constitution of your party, you lose the membership of your party. And when you lose the membership of your party, you can't continue to represent them in Parliament, because representing a party in Parliament is an office of a party. It's one of the offices of a party. That's the first thing. And with the greatest respect to Professor Addo, the Constitution says that if a vacancy is created in Parliament 3 months to the election, no by-election will be held.
Right.
So to say that the Babel decision has worked, the people of the constituencies where these people, these four members of Parliament who have been affected by the decision, has robbed them of representation, is moot. Because the Constitution already anticipates that situation. And so if it was not even by the rogue act of these members of Parliament, but by the natural occurrence of death, no by-election would have been held. And those constituencies and other constituencies would not have had a representation.
All right.
Indeed, you can't even argue on the basis of a representation. And now feel scandalized if we are going to use the basis of representation as Professor Addo has said, as a basis to ignore the implication and risk of Article 97(1)(g). Because we all know that
Inus Hussaini, your line is just a bit problematic. If you could just move a little for me, I'd be grateful. Let's see whether the line is better. Can I hear from you?
Can you hear me now?
It's better. But just a quick point before you proceed. You made mention of the constitutions of the respective parties. And yes, they do talk about the fact that, I mean, the MPP's constitution makes it clear that immediately you move from the party while you are representative, or you contest on the ticket of any party or go independent, you cease to be a member. I get that. But the constitutions of these political parties, in this sense, the MPP and the NDC, do not override, they do not subsume the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. So some have said that the interpretation shouldn't be based on what party constitutions are saying, but the fine print of the law and what it means in spirit and in letter. Is that not? Should that not be the case?
But the same Constitution and the political parties law says that parties must run those institutions. Those in charge of running parties must run their parties consistent with democratic principles. So if you are a party and you are not running your party in line with democratic principles, you will be breaching the Constitution, and you will be breaching the laws of the country, not so. So you have to take all the facts into consideration. If your party says that you have lost your membership of the party, tell me a logical ground on which you can continue to hold yourself as an officer of the party by representing the party in parliament.
Do you think Aaron Michael Quay, Prof, the former speaker, got it right in that 2020 ruling? And do you think that precedent is enough to carry forward into this arena in the 8th Parliament? Some have said that that was a mistake. In fact, I was joined this morning by the Otafo lawmaker, Vincent Ekoya-Sifwa, and he says if there were mistakes then, the law is an organism that grows, right? We're all conversant with this. It should adapt to what fits the perspective of the time. It then would appear that the law is not growing per how we've reflected it. What is your take?
The growth of the law is not within the ambit of Parliament. It's within the ambit of the judiciary. And particularly, the adaptation of provisions of the Constitution is within the ambit of the Supreme Court. You cannot say that because of certain exigencies, Parliament should openly and flagrantly violate the provisions of the law. But if you go to the Supreme Court and you argue on the basis of the exigencies of the situation and the need to adapt, and the Supreme Court agrees with you, because we, the people of this country, the creed, the universal creed, we, the people, have said that it is only the Supreme Court that can interpret the Constitution. So if you go and argue before the Supreme Court that the exigencies of the situation require that this particular interpretation be put on the constitutional provision, and the Supreme Court agrees with you, that becomes the new law, that becomes the law. We will all be mandated, because of the universal creed, we will all be mandated to follow the decision of the Supreme Court.
Yes, but even there, courtesy of judicial review, even that decision could be, overridden. And I've given the example in recent times of Roe versus Wade. It just requires the apt number of people who think in a different way, and that could be overridden.
Yeah, but that is the beauty of precedent.
Okay.
That is the beauty of democracy. That is the beauty of certainty and predictability, as I told you. That is the beauty of the rule of law. So if a Supreme Court reviews a decision, its own decision, and by you, we know the Supreme Court can review it.
Okay, all right.
Why the Supreme Court has let me. If the Supreme Court reviews its own decision, it becomes strong.
Your line is breaking up, Inusuf Hussaini, but hold for me, Inusuf Hussaini. Let me bring in Professor Bafo-Adjumandua. Prof, you've heard what Inusuf Hussaini is saying, but I just want to, in addition to what you're going to say, reflect also on Sao, Santro Kofi, Akpafu, Likpe, and Lolobi, right? You said that, the constituents are being denied representation. How about Sao? We denied them. So what is your reflection on that, in addition to what you want to say?
Yeah, in fact, when I was kind of reflecting over this, the first thing that came to mind was sad. The fact that these people have been excluded from representation for the past 4 years or so. And of course, that's a major concern for the issue of representation. So what is going to happen is almost similar. But, let me be clear with my good friend, Mr. Hussaini. I am not in disagreement with the rule of the Speaker in terms of the technical basis of his ruling. I think, as I say, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but reading the Constitution is clear that he made the right decision. So I'm not faulting him at all. And I think this is going to be a big lesson for the politicians, as Hussaini referred to. And I'm totally in agreement with him. So what we are saying is, look, if you want to place representation above the law, and nobody is arguing that we should undermine the rule of law, I think it's important we uphold the rule. But the point I was making earlier was simply that, when you are making decisions, as the Speaker has made, there are certain things you take into account. What in law they will call the extenuating factors or the mitigating factors or whatever. You look at the total environment and then you make a decision that would not kind of rock the boat, so to speak. That is not to undermine the rule of law. In fact, there have been many instances where judges have made decisions, not strictly on the technicality of the law, but looking at the larger environment, they'll make a certain decision in order to maintain some sense of stability. I'm not saying this particular rule is going to upset the whole nation, no. But look, Fuseni also made a point about the Constitution addressing the issue of representation, that 3 months after you are vacated, there will be by-election. In this particular case, where is the 3 months? The 3 months not available for the constituents to elect.
Right.
So looking at this, it becomes kind of very interesting issue. And I'm happy that this issue has come. It's a challenge to our democracy, and that is how you build up your democracy. So I'm not worried about the decision, but I was taking into larger account what really are the consequences of this. Now, the new minority wants to go to the Supreme Court. I don't know how long it's going to take the court to make a ruling, because traditionally, with drug issues, in this case, maybe the Chief Justice would decide to make an emergency meeting and all. Nonetheless, the fact is that, like the South that you referred to, these 4 constituencies will not have a representation for the rest of the ninth Parliament. That was a concern for me. But I guess we will find a way to deal with that as we go along.
All right. Let me bring in Dr. Rashid Draman. The former majority leader, now minority leader, Alexander Afinyo-Markin, has said that this will bring some confusion to Parliament. Of course, we are not certain how this will impact government business. How exactly, from your experience of following Parliament, will this impact the House, and what do you forecast that can be done between the new majority and the new minority to ensure that government business still continues?
Yes, so Benjamin, no matter how you cut it, business is going to suffer in Parliament. I mean, let's look at a number of perspectives. So first of all, government business, as we know it, because most of the business done in the House comes from government. So most of the bills, agreements and so on, certainly that's not going to come. We are fortunate today we are in a regime where private members can bring bills to the House. Just yesterday, I was part of a group who were looking at a private members' bill that is seeking to regulate how Parliament can play a role in international agreements and so on that come before the House. Parliament can continue to work on this. The new majority can continue to work on such businesses, which are private businesses. But the finality, the output of these would have to go to the President for assent. Under the circumstances, it will look like that's not going to happen, because we have already seen in the last couple of months, even in one instance, the Office of the Presidency cease and desist from bringing this near my office.
Yeah.
We have seen another bill that was passed into law, a private member's bill about, I think, witchcraft or so, promoted by the Honorable Member for Medina. That has also not been signed.
Right.
What this is going to do to us is that if the new majority carries out any business and it gets to the doorstep of the President, we are likely not going to see anything done about those.
On the other hand, yes, now the new minority would also likely not have its way. They have even said that they are boycotting Parliament. So what would that mean for government business from that angle?
Yes. So what that would mean for government business is that until they come to the House, and let's first of all understand the conditions under which they will come to the House. That is after the Supreme Court gives a ruling, because they say they will come only after that determination. Now, however, you know, the ruling, wherever the ruling goes, let's assume the status quo, the Speaker's ruling is upheld. I am sure they are not going to be pleased, and they are likely not to cooperate with the new majority. If the Speaker's ruling is overturned by the court, the new majority group would have to revert to their old position, and I believe they will see it as a miscarriage of justice. They are not going to be happy. So, however you cut it, Benjamin, I think we are going to be in very interesting times, and it's going to be very difficult for both parties to cooperate, no matter how the decision, what the decision of the Supreme Court is. Because if the NDC is to go back to your old position, what we are going to hear is likely that, I'm not urging them to do anything, but I'm just, projecting what I know could happen. They are going to say, we are not going to cooperate. And sometimes the MPP doesn't have all the numbers in the House for decisions to take place, because you show us on your screen, on our screens every day, the quorum challenge and so on. And it always takes some negotiation and some cooperation from the NDC to get some government business done. So however you cut it, Benjamin, we are going to be in very interesting times for the next couple of weeks. But I'm happy the issue of SAL came up, because that was one issue that I was also going to raise, because these people were denied representation, and nobody raised a finger in this country except, Imani and others who have gone to court. And still, even the court, up to this day, we don't know what the determination is. So if, as the Constitution says, time is short, there's not going to be any by-election when we are about to go into a major election, I believe so be it. I think the people in these four constituencies might have to live with this constitutional provision.
So, Professor Bafo-Addo said something, and I'm going to Inusa Hussaini now. Mr. Hussaini, can you hear me? Inusa Hussaini. I can hear you. Okay, good. Professor Bafo-Addo says, technically, he agrees with what the Speaker did, because if on the face of the law, prima facie, 97(1)(g) and H point in a certain direction. And that is the antecedent or the precedent set as well by Professor Aaron Michael Quay. But the suggestion is that for the sake of the larger democracy, maybe the Speaker could have ruled in a different way to avoid the sort of tension that we are going to experience. And again, to avoid the, so to speak, and I'm not using the right term, meddling of the apex court in the business of Parliament. And I use meddling not in any nefarious terms. What do you think of that? Wouldn't that have served our democracy better?
Well, our democracy is served better when we act consistently, so that individuals will know that this is the expected outcome. In fact, if Honorable Bagbin, as Speaker, had ruled otherwise, the debate would have been more intense than it is now. Because we see some consistency, the debate is what is the way forward. So I don't have any iota of doubt that this decision has been received favorably with a majority or by a majority of people. I have no doubt about that. Number two, people talk of intermeddling, the Supreme Court potentially intermeddling in the affairs of Parliament. No, I don't see it that way. The Supreme Court has defined responsibility. Again, coming back to what I said earlier, in accordance with the rule of law. They cannot take on a matter that they are not seized with the jurisdiction to take on. And Parliament and the Speaker has a certain defined responsibility given to him. When Parliament is performing their responsibility and are not straying into the interpretative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court will not meddle. But if the matter that Parliament is handling has a potential interpretative connotation, then somebody can go to court to say that Parliament is seeking to do what the Supreme Court has been vested with power to do. The Supreme Court will have to evaluate the petition, and if it agrees that Parliament is doing what it has been mandated to do, it will hold what Parliament has done as unconstitutional, null and void. So there is no intermediary here. There are clear-cut responsibilities. Now, what Speaker Bagwin has done has sought to enforce, not interpret, enforce Article 97(1)(g), consistent with precedent. His understanding of the implication of Article 97(1)(g), the conventions that have been developed in Parliament, and so on. If the Supreme Court comes to a different conclusion, we will all have to follow the Supreme Court. So there's no problem.
All right, let me
now,
just...
I hear people, no, let me come, just a minute. I hear people talk about Parliament. Parliament has the power to regulate its own affairs. I also hear people talk of majority leader and minority leader. I will crave your indulgence to read the definition of majority leader and minority leader. My understanding before I left Parliament was the majority leader is a person designated by the party with the numerous or the highest numerical strength in Parliament forming government.
Right.
And so, if Akufo-Addo becomes, if NDC becomes the majority in Parliament, will they be forming government? No. So Parliament will have to devise an institutional mechanism to accommodate this new arrangement.
Is that another area? Is that another area where maybe there should be a ruling of the Apex Court to streamline matters? You've raised another clear point there. And added to that, just give me an answer to this, in addition to that question I just posed. If you read 99(1) of our Constitution, 99(1)(a), there's a problem that some people have raised, that the Speaker himself did not have jurisdiction on this matter. 99(1) says, the High Court shall have jurisdiction to hear and determine any question whether a person has been validly elected as a member of Parliament or the seat of a member has become vacant. The others are not so important to us right now. How do you reflect on these two matters? Those will be your final words.
Well, so if, and it's about election, so you must read the provision as a whole. Has a person been validly elected? If the High Court says that person has not been validly elected, that seat becomes vacant. You must read the provision as a whole.
But it also says, or the seat of a member has become vacant. They are not talking about
different situations. They are talking about one and the same situation. So they are talking about election petition. That provision is about election petition. So if a person goes to the High Court with an election petition, it is the High Court that has exclusive jurisdiction to determine whether that person has been validly elected.
Right.
And if the court comes to the conclusion that that person has not been validly elected, that seat becomes vacant. So you read that provision as a whole. You don't divide it.
Inusa, just a quick one. I'm going to Andrew's Egyapa Mercer on this very quickly. But the point is that it is clear, a person has been validly elected as a member of parliament or the seat of a member has become vacant. I believe there are two issues at play there. But let me bring in Andrew Egyapa Mercer, the secondee legislator, on this briefly, and then I'll come back to you. Mr. Egyapa Mercer, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
It's good to have you join the conversation. I hope you're well.
Thank you. I'm good. By His grace, yourself?
I am well. What do you make of this development?
Your viewers and my good friend Inusa Hussein.
Great. There's also Professor Bafo Ejimendua and Dr. Rashid Rahman. All of them are on the conversation. What do you make of this development? And briefly, what do you think this means for the end of the 8th Parliament?
I think it was a very sad day for our democracy yesterday. The Speaker, even though I haven't had the benefit of the entirety of his ruling, the substantive part really is the effect that by reason of the intention that has been expressed by these individuals to contest the 9th Parliament on the ticket, either sponsored or individually, by way of independent, by necessary implication, forfeit their seats in Parliament today, which really is the 8th Parliament. Really, it was baffling. Because if you read Article 97 of the Constitution, and I didn't get the full submission of my good friend, Leonard Senior Inusa Hussein,
right,
that he was making statements to the effect that you need to read either the provision of the Constitution as a whole, whichever the case may be. In the canons of constitutional interpretation, every student of constitutional law is very much aware that you need to construe the Constitution in a purposive manner, such that if the provisions in there are to be interpreted, you need to look at what the framers of the Constitution intended to achieve, and then make a construction to that effect. And in many events, whatever construction that you make should not lead to an absurdity, right? So what was the intendment of the framers of the Constitution in providing for the clauses G and H? There really is a history to this.
The precedent that was set by Aaron Michael Quay has also been brought into question in 2020. And some have said, why should it be different strokes for different folks? Does
it's neither here nor there.
Does the reasoning then not apply now?
So it is not as if, in any event, who says that the decision of Michael Quay is bound or binding on the current Parliament?
But it sets a certain precedent, doesn't it?
It doesn't set any precedent. The precedent means that you have to follow by operation of law. That if a higher court has ruled in a certain direction, you cannot depart from it.
Are you telling me that Parliament, the House of Parliament, does not adopt some precedents based on previous rulings? Because my following of Parliament suggests that in many instances you do, and you cite previous events to support decisions that are taken. It appears we've lost Andrew Egyapa Mercer, but I was going to engage in a bit of a tussle with him there on the issue of precedent. But let me just come briefly. Inusa Hussein, final words in some 20 seconds, and then I'll go to my other guests for their final words. On the back of Inusa, let me bring in the question, and then you can wrap with the others.
Okay.
On the back of all of these things we are talking about, is that not even more reason the Apex Court should deliver finality on some of these matters, so that we can have some conclusivity on it? Before you come in, I'm so sorry, I have to go back to Egyapa Mercer to conclude. Andrews, you have final point, and then we can go.
I was making the point that in any event, every parliament has a life of its own. And that for the 2 terms that have been in parliament, unlike in the court where if judges are delivering a ruling, they cite legal authorities to back their reasoning.
Let's move away from that. The point I'm making is even in Parliament, often decisions are making and they cite. They say that, well,
now,
on the back of this and that. It applies as well.
But is it an automatic? Is it an automatic event that the speaker necessarily has to cite authorities and say that they are bound by those authorities? Of course, if there's a certain decision that has been delivered by the court,
okay,
right, in making a ruling on the floor, the speaker may refer to those decisions of the court to arrive at a conclusion.
And the speaker has.
But
He's decided to do that.
I'm saying that in our standing orders, Parliament has no business referencing any so-called precedent of a previous speaker's decision. No way.
All right.
In any event, this scenario of independent candidates filing on the ticket of political parties, but is it the first time that this has happened? What played out then? What played out then? So really, look, I have read some commentary by my good friend Justice Sremsai. I tried to call him, but of course he didn't pick up. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he was probably engaged in some other activity at 6:30, hence he's not picking my call. And I've read the position that Professor Asare Kweku has articulated.
Is it Ansar Asare or Kweku Asare? Because I've seen Ansar Asare.
Okay,
all right.
Kweku, yeah, I mean, okay. It makes a lot of sense. Why? Because the mischief that this provision sought to cure was the situation where in the first Republican Parliament, people could cross from one side of the aisle to the other and remain in Parliament. It clearly disrupted the balance of power at the whim of whoever the executive was, leading to the one-party state that we had in Ghana. Did we want to go there going forward? Certainly not. That's why this provision was put in the Constitution. In fact, in the second, third, and fourth Republican Constitution, to ensure that during the tenure of a particular parliament, no individual would be allowed to cross carpet from one party to the other as an independent to a political party or from a political party to an independent, just so that the balance of power that the people had mandated their MPs to go and carry out remain for the tenure of that parliament.
So just give me a straight answer to this. So we have to go. We have to go, Egyapa, unfortunately. But
here is the case where, and you see, it's important to recognize that.
Right.
If it were possible for the life of the parliament to end before the processes leading to the election of members of parliament for the next parliament commence, this situation does not arise.
All right. So your side in Parliament,
leading to the ninth Parliament, it can never, under any stretch of the imagination, be construed to include activities or actions that are taking place now to affect the Parliament today.
In this unprecedented move, your side now, the minority, you say you are going to boycott, Parliament at least. I don't know whether until the Apex Court rules on this matter. So the boycott still remains, right? Yes or no?
I will leave the leadership of my caucus to decide. But think about it. Think about it. That's one point.
Andrew Egyapa Mercer, we have to go.
No, please, it's important. Please, just one point. Please.
Okay, go ahead.
Now,
go ahead.
You require 1/3 of members of parliament to constitute the quorum.
Right.
You require more than 1/2 of parliament to take a decision. This so-called majority that the NDC claim they are in is 136. How are they going to take any decision in parliament? How?
What if the idea is not to get any decision in parliament?
It tells you the political mischief that they are seeking to disrupt important bills that have been laid to make the pre-SHS, for example, law, to pass the tax exemptions that is going to lead to job creation for our people. All this, according to them, in their view, will not augur well for their political future.
Okay.
And so they, of necessity, ought to take steps that will disrupt the course of the people of the and they will take a decision on the 7th of December. Whether that, I don't want to use the word that I'm off. Let me leave it here.
Thank you. Andrew Egyapa Mercer is the legislator for 2nd. He joined us with his thoughts. Inusa Hussaini, I know I've come to you so many times. Your quick thoughts, and then I'll go to Prof and Dr. Draman.
Well, first of all, I started by saying that I hate it when lawyers, and second, to explain the jurisdiction of the court, the interpretative jurisdiction of the court, jump straight away to the purposive approach. That is not the rule. The cardinal rules of interpretation says you give ordinary words, ordinary and natural words, their ordinary signification. What they mean is what they say. It is only when giving them that meaning will lead to an absurdity that you get a positive approach. That is why it's the point. And technically, must be.
Inusa, move a bit. I am losing you. Move just a little. Move a little for me.
So it is not the first rule of interpretation to use the purposive rule. It is not the first.
Right.
Secondly, the jurisdiction of the court, of the Supreme Court, is not raised by emotional outburst. The jurisdiction of the court is raised by necessary petition invoking that jurisdiction. So I'll pray my good friend Akufo-Addo Mercer, a colleague, that let's stop the bastardization of Parliament. Nobody is saying that decision of Speaker is cast in diamond, gold, or silver. Go and take that decision. Okay. But not bastardize Parliament. I will be the last person to bastardize Parliament. And let me again say, when Speaker Mike Okwe received the petition from the MPP in the 7th Parliament and proceeded without involving Parliament to give a ruling, as the ranking member of the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament, I raised an objection to the procedure because a speaker is a presiding member.
Right.
What is jurisdiction invoked? And it must be invoked on the floor of the House. It must be invoked.
Okay.
So the speaker, when he receives a petition, must refer it to the necessary committee for them to deliberate and invoke his jurisdiction.
So it is clear you gentlemen disagree to agree on this matter. Right.
Let's just last point. If Akufo-Addo Mercer had read the judgment or decision or ruling of Bagban, he would have noted that Bagban said he was not bound by the decision of Michael Quay.
All right.
So
Mr. Hussaini.
You don't have to fight with him on the basis of precedent. The Speaker himself has told you that he was not bound by that precedent.
Mr. Hussaini, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Prof, final words on this matter?
Well, with less than 2 months to go to the end of this Parliament, I'm only hoping that the Parliament will find a way, and I think my good friend Ramani has said it so well. It's doubtful whether the new opposition or the new majority, I should say, will be able to cooperate with government to execute government business. So let's hope that we will have a peaceful end to this Parliament, and we'll start again when we have the election. But I can tell you, this is going to create some difficulty for governance in the coming weeks.
Well, until the court rules, we'll still have to wait and see what that means. Dr. Rashid Draman, you have the final word.
Yes. So, Benjamin, I think 2 things. First of all, I hope that the Supreme Court would move very swiftly on this and bring finality to this matter. And I hope that, emotions do not continue to rise. As we are seeing from both sides. But I have no doubt that this is going to be a very big test for our democracy. And democracies, if we are truly a democracy, I believe we have the capacity to ride this storm, and democracies have mechanisms to regulate themselves. So I have no doubt that we'll find a solution to this, and hopefully cool heads will prevail, and then we'll go into this crucial election in one piece as a nation.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for having joined the conversation. We heard from Egyapa Mercer, the second D legislator. We heard from Inusa Fuseni, who himself has been a member of parliament representing Tamale Central. We had Professor Bafo Ajiman-Dua, a United Nations advisor on governance, former United Nations advisor on governance. And we also had Dr. Rashid Draman of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. All of them joining us on this conversation. But again, with only 50 days remaining until this year's presidential and parliamentary elections, there's still, well, a lot to dilate on as far as these topical matters are concerned. We'll be bringing you more conversations this morning on the AM show right after this. You want to stay for that.